Most of the probiotics that we are buying right now never make it to our intestines where they need to be in one piece. They get destroyed by the stomach acid and they just don't survive the trip. And we are spending millions of dollars on these products that, quite frankly, just aren't designed to survive the trip through our stomach and into our intestines. Today, we are going to be talking about a very specific class of probiotics called spore-based probiotics that have an armored shield around them that essentially ensures deliverability of these probiotics to our small intestines where they can actually make a difference in our GI health. If we are meeting for the first time, my name is Dan Zatarski. I am a compounding pharmacist. I essentially help to formulate and design medication from scratch. We have over 20,000 formulas. But my focus here is to help patients to live optimal lives. And I think probiotics are essential, but they have to get into our small intestines. And a lot of patients are taking, in my opinion, the wrong strains and the wrong form of these probiotics that essentially don't do us enough good in our GI tract. So let's get into today's content. We are going to look at, again, 3 mechanisms on these spore-based probiotics, what they do, how they do it, and what we can gain from a health perspective to improve the GI health overall. So let's first look at the armor that these spore-biotics have. So these spores, they have, the way I would frame this is that the spore is like an armor shield around the probiotic. So these spores are not dead, they're just dormant. And so they've got this protective coating around them that allows them to just power down. And so think of it this way, traditional probiotics, they're like a house plant. They are delicate, they need the right temperature, they need the right amount of water, they need just the perfect environment to survive. On the other side, think of spore-based probiotics as a seed. They power down, again, they're in this dormancy phase, but once they hit your small intestine, that's when the spore shell, the armor, breaks apart, and those bacteria are able to thrive in the right environment. And that casing that they carry, the outer shell, is able to survive the very acidic stomach. Because a lot of these probiotics that we're spending our money on, they don't survive the pH of the stomach. You know, the normal pH is roughly around 1.2 to 2. That is enough to dissolve metal in the stomach. That's how acidic our stomach is, and it's there for a reason. One of those reasons, we don't eat sterile food. We all know this, and so that acidity helps to kill off a lot of the bacteria and viruses and things to that nature that are in our food inherently. So these spores are just a great way to deliver probiotics, good bacteria, to help repopulate our GI tract with good bacteria. And now this is the same bacteria that we were born with on day 1. And so what these spores are doing is they're helping to, and this is kind of mechanism number 2 that I'm getting into, is they help to tend to the soil. What I mean by that is these spores, what they'll do, they're transient. They're not going to be there to take up permanent residency in the GI tract, but really what they're doing is helping to recondition the soil. What I'm referring to there is really reconditioning our stomach lining and our intestines. And so this is where the beauty of these spore-biotics, this is where we see the beauty of these spore-biotics, is that they can recondition our GI tract to allow our endogenous flora, our original GI flora, to, again, recultivate because it's prepping the soil for new bacteria to grow again. So I want to expand a little bit on this analogy that I'm using about the garden and the gut being the garden. What I mean by that, and I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of research here, but there was a study done in 2020 that looked at a very specific strain of a spore called Bacillus subtilis HU58. From now on, we're just going to call this HU58. But this specific study took a human GI tract, a human gut model called M-Sheen. That's not important, but basically what researchers did is they set up a model of the human GI tract. And they gave this model antibiotics to kill off the natural flora. Then they went in and they populated the GI tract with this specific strain of spore, this HU58. What it found was that the HU58, it didn't go in and establish residency, permanent residency in the GI tract. What it did is it conditioned the intestines so that our natural flora can repopulate again. So in the clinical world, what researchers talk about when they talk about probiotics as a diverse product is that it's helping to reestablish our natural flora. It's setting up our GI tract to help our what they call keystone species flourish again. And that's really critical here is we want to be taking, in my opinion, and all the research I've done on probiotics, we want to be taking a probiotic that can help reestablish keystone species, again, natural flora that our GI tract needs to help produce a healthy ecosystem. And so that's really important. We're not just taking one strain of a probiotic that is then doing all the work and heavy lifting in the GI tract. We want a diverse ecosystem down in our small intestines. We want a lot of different bacteria, good bacteria, that are doing a multitude of different functions. The important thing here too is that these probiotics, these spore-based probiotics, are producing something called postbiotics. They are producing things like carotenoids or short-chain fatty acids. So it's really important to understand that really two things here. Survival of the probiotic through the stomach that we just talked about. But secondly, setting up the environment so that our natural flora, our keystone species can flourish. And then really the third important thing is that it sets up the environment so that these postbiotics can be produced and maintained so that our GI tract has some type of normalcy to it. From a symptomatic standpoint, we see this. Anyone that's taken an antibiotic and they've gotten diarrhea, right? Anyone that's taken courses of NSAIDs long-term or steroids, there's a lot of different medications out there that can be very disruptive to the GI tract and to our ecosystem down there, to the microflora. So it's important to understand that not all probiotics are created equally, and we really want to start looking at which bacteria are getting into the small intestine. And that's, again, where these spore-based probiotics in this research that is, again, I'll say relatively new in the last 6 years, 5-6 years, is showing that these spores have a high survivability rate greater than 90%. Some of these studies are looking at greater than 99% survivability rate is just phenomenal. And it's, again, helping these keystone species to flourish. Let's get into another strain that I find absolutely fascinating as well, and why it is so important to help with the integrity of the GI tract, especially when it comes to the short-chain fatty acid production. So before I start talking about short-chain fatty acids and butyrate, I want to step back for a minute here and talk about another strain of a spore biotic called Bacillus indicus HU36. Now, we're just going to call it HU36, but this is a fascinating spore probiotic, which has the ability to survive the acid bath of the stomach and get into the small intestines, into the, as we call it in this video, the soil, to help nurture the soil and to help produce postbiotics that can be very beneficial. So HU36 in some studies have been shown to produce up to 15 different carotenoids. So we're talking about things like beta-carotene, lycopene, lutein, zeaxanthine, astaxanthine. So we have to reframe this a little bit because normally when we talk about supplements and vitamins, we're talking about a cofactor in a particular, mechanism. There's some kind of biological reaction that needs, a B vitamin or vitamin D or something to that nature, and that material is used up and it's expelled, and so we have to take more of it, or vitamin C, magnesium, a mineral where it has utilization to it, and then it gets used up, so we need to take more of that product or more of that supplement the next day or the day after, whatever the case may be. But with HU36, this kind of changes the story here because this particular probiotic is producing a multitude, and as I just said a moment ago, up to 15 different carotenoids that are beneficial, potentially beneficial to the body, right? So these carotenoids, as we all know them, carotenoids give the different colors to like tomatoes and to carrots, things to that nature. These really can help with things like, eyesight. They can help with things like healthy skin, a healthy heart. And so I think as researchers really start to peel back more of the benefits that we see with these spore-based probiotics, we're going to see how much more valuable they can be in our overall health. So I think there's a lot more to come in the research and the value that these spore-biotics can possibly bring to our overall health. So I would think of HU36 not just as another strain of a probiotic to keep our GI tract regulated, but really to improve our overall health by producing these postbiotics, these carotenoids that our body depends on for a multitude of different reasons physiologically. So let's go back to that butyrate example that I was talking about just a moment ago. So just so we're on the same page, there are a few different short-chain fatty acids that are beneficial to our body. Specifically today, we're going to talk about butyrate. Why we're going to focus on that is because spore-based probiotics have been shown to improve keystone species. So again, going back to our natural flora, our microbiome diversity, and helping to produce these very specific strains of probiotics, which then in turn produce short-chain fatty acids, and specifically butyrate. Butyrate is basically the fuel that our colon cells thrive on. It is the energy, it's the gasoline that our stomach lining cells depend upon to be vibrant and strong. So when we have dysbiosis, we don't have those keystone species that are producing butyrate, and you can probably see where this is going, then that lack of butyrate causes those cells to break down, and we can ultimately come up with dysbiosis and, worse yet, leaky gut, where we get a breakdown of that mucin layer and we get a breakdown of those colon cells, which then leads possibly to an infiltration of toxins and contaminants into our systemic circulation. So all of that said, what a nice probiotic should be doing is helping to establish those keystone species again to a certain level so that we can produce this butyrate, this short-chain fatty acid, this fuel that our colon cells need. The problem here, and I see this quite often in our pharmacy here, is patients come in with a lot of vague, just subtle symptoms. They'll complain of gas, bloating, food sensitivities, low-grade inflammation that they really can't describe. And after I do a short medication history with them, I realize they might have been on probiotics, or they might have been on antibiotics, or a course of NSAIDs, or some other type of medication that might have disrupted their microbiome. Even a short course of antacids like proton pump inhibitors can be problematic and create dysbiotic gut, which ultimately leads to a lower production of this butyrate, this short-chain fatty acid. So something to keep in mind is that we want to be starting to look at probiotics. Are they helping to, again, upregulate the production of our keystone species, of the good bacteria in our GI tract to help produce this butyrate short-chain fatty acid? Because if they're not, we might want to be looking at a different probiotic supplement. Now, if this is your first time hearing about survival rates on probiotics, and if this is your first time hearing about butyrate and why that is important, I'm sure there's somebody else that you might know that is suffering with digestive issues, and they probably need to hear this too. So I'm going to ask you for a favor. I want you to pause the video right now, and I want you to go and share this video with someone that is struggling with some GI issues. The other thing I'm going to ask you to do is to please like and subscribe to this channel. Every day we're trying to put out new information about optimal ways to improve our physiology. And so I need your help to get that information out. A couple of months ago we did some videos on basic nutrients like vitamin D and vitamin C and how that can help to lower our risk of cancers spreading in our body. And I found that research just to be absolutely fascinating. But a lot of this information, like today on probiotics and spore-based probiotics, just doesn't get out to mainstream medicine. It probably never makes a headline. It probably never reaches your consult with your doctor or your healthcare team. So that's why I'm here today to again ask you, quick pause the video and share this with someone that you might know that's been on multiple rounds of antibiotics or has been complaining of GI symptoms that haven't been quite diagnosed properly. There might be an issue there where their microflora, their GI tract flora has just been completely destroyed or even partially destroyed, and now they're continually suffering with symptoms. So again, and I thank you for that. The more support we can get for this channel, I think the better we can get this information out to those that really need it most. So one last thing here that I want to share with you about this spore-based probiotic is not all spore-based probiotics are created equally. We have partnered here with a company in the US that they have spent millions of dollars on research and researching very specific strains of probiotics in the spore-based subclass that have been showing a lot of benefit in a multitude of different areas in our health. Things like stress and anxiety, things like weight loss. And so we're going to get more and more information from this company. And again, we've partnered with them to come up with a formula that I think is, again, probably just the tip of the iceberg, but I have found it even in my own health to be very beneficial. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. Again, if you haven't, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button. Again, every week we're trying to get out new material to patients where this conversation generally doesn't end up in your conversation with your healthcare provider. So there's probably a lot of other patients out there that need to hear this message. And again, this is a very simple conversation about the GI tract, but we have to make sure that we are taking the right probiotic, and in this case, the spore-based probiotic, because that bacteria is able to survive the GI tract, survive the acidity of the stomach, and again, recondition the garden, as I like to use that analogy, so that our keystone species can flourish. So it's more, our GI tract is more than just a tube that helps to digest our food. It produces a lot of postbiotics and other compounds that can ultimately improve our health overall. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.